back to the GTR24H podcast talk show with myself, Kieran McGinley. We have switched on to our last guest for now. It's Yousuf Bin-Suhayl. Yousuf, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. As they say, best for last, right?
Well, they do say that. Let's find out how true that is. Yousuf, I mean, you've got a very different route into commentary because you've been on the casting side of League of Legends. You've dabbled in a bit of Rocket League. Let's talk through what makes Yousuf. How did it all first start?
So, for me, it actually started probably when I was about 3-4 years old. I remember my dad used to have a Toka 2 on a Microsoft Sidewinder wheel, and he'd put me in a high chair and I'd be racing on it, probably crashing all the time. But he'd always be making like really snide comments about, oh, he's put it in a wall, all of that kind of stuff. So I guess that was my first kind of introduction into commentating. And whenever my dad would be in the wheel, obviously I'd try to emulate that and do the same, probably terribly. And on car journeys, when we'd go to places, I'd always pretend like it was an F1 race. And I'd try to work out what position my dad was in so that when we'd get to our destination, he'd be battling for first. And hopefully a random car would appear that he could overtake. So it kind of started from there, and then at university joined the Radio Society, and I guess the rest is kind of history from that point.
So you say you joined the Radio Society. What did that entail? What did that involve?
So I made a show called Random Banter on that, which was just a podcast show where we talk about random stuff. It has some like games going on, all of those kind of things. And another show we had was an F1 podcast channel. So we would essentially just give a rundown of all of the free practices, qualifying in the race. It was myself and a friend, Yander Burr, who I actually haven't been in contact with in a while, but we had a really nice show. We ended up doing some commentary, some live commentary. I think it was for the Monaco Grand Prix of 2017, but I might be wrong on that. Either way, it was good fun, and then I got to commentate on one of the York football games. From there, it was York futsal through one of my friends, Michael Grattan, and yeah, it was just, each step was just like, yeah, I really like this, want to do more and more. And after university, jumped into sim racing.
So let's talk about motorsport as well. Do you remember your first race watching?
So my first race, the first race I ever watched would have been, I think I was about 5 or 6, and all I remember is it being a Friday afternoon and I had to go for Friday prayers, but my dad having on the screen, I think it was, I want to say it was a Hungary practice session. This was back when UK TV actually showed practice or qualifying as well. So I just remember that being on and looking at, I think it was one of the Toyotas or Renaults back then, just shooting past a whole bunch of trees. So yeah, that's kind of my first memory of racing, really.
And so growing up, did you have any sort of motorsport idols? Was there anyone in particular?
I think when I was young, it was probably Michael Schumacher. Another big one would be my dad, because my dad used to race in Rover GTIs, which at the time was a support series for the British Touring Car Championship. So in our garage, he had his old Rover in, and it used to be the best thing in the world to go into that garage, sneak in, open the door, and just sit in, like put on the 6-point harness that's way too big for me, and just sit there just holding the wheel, looking at, like pretending that I'm in a race.
So was there at one point a route into driving yourself? Was that something you ever wanted to do?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad got me a go-kart. I was very lucky that he got me a go-kart when I was 5 or 6, and it was a grass kart. So because I live in Norfolk, we have a whole bunch of space in the back garden, just loads of grass, trees, all of that kind of stuff. So it was just pelting this grass kart through the trees, and then my dad had one as well, and we're just going through the trees like crazy. I think we hit a couple of trees at times as well. After that, we ended up getting a cadet kart, raced in cadet series, actually raced against Lando Norris as well at one point. Didn't beat him. Yeah, I was about 2 positions off him. So it's kind of cool, because recently I was going through my old races and you recognise a few of the names that are through, and it's really cool.
So obviously you've mentioned your dad quite a lot. Would you say he's one of the big inspirations in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Watching him race, I never got to watch him race competitively in Rovers, but watching him on, I guess, the sim, Toka 2, and then going to races with my dad when karting, and growing up, essentially learning all of my racing from my dad.
So how does that, you've got that early career in motorsport.
Yeah.
You've been kart racing, you've been in the Rover GTI garage. How does that insight sort of help with your commentary later down the line?
I've always quite enjoyed explaining stuff. I don't know why. It's just what I like to do. So I've always found that because I have got a little bit of a background in karting, it's not a huge amount, not compared to some of the other guys out there, but it's enough. And I just really like that experience and being able to add those little insights that I found when racing, when preparing for a race to my commentary.
And you do a bit of racing even today, also in higher kart racing.
Yes.
How does that have an effect on how you commentate? Do you feel there's sort of any transferable skills you could take away from either?
I don't really know. It's more of a case of it just keeps the racing going almost, and whether that's the karting that I do or sim racing, it just keeps your mind refreshed and it just makes you remember what is going on in your mind. Because for me anyway, karting or racing isn't something that you forget. I mean, as soon as you jump back in a car, you remember everything, and your skills all come back after a few minutes. It all floods back in. But sometimes you just do need that little jolt to remember what you do in terms of how you approach a qualifying session, how you approach learning a track, and remembering, okay, these are mistakes that you make. How does your brain process improving on that and realizing it's a mistake?
And you also do a bit of casting in the past, and presently in League of Legends. You've also dabbled in Rocket League as well, which is cars and football, which is a great combination.
Yeah.
And a bit of boost in there. You can't go far wrong. So, how do you sort of prepare for all of those? What was the route that said, yes, this is what I want to do? So,
from uni, when I was doing all the radio stuff, I kind of told myself I want to be a presenter, and the kind of goal was I want to be doing hosting Top Gear with Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Ham, James May, that kind of thing. That's what really stood out to me, and to an extent it still does appeal to me to a degree. And if that opportunity came up down the line, there's no way in hell I'm turning that one down.
That's the message out there then.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the message from Yousuf. He won't turn it down. So obviously I guess there's some sort of transferable skills where you say you're driving and then you're commentating, you can sort of take that perspective in. Is that the same with League of Legends and with Rocket League, that you need that experience in actually being competitive in it?
Yeah, and I mean, from a commentating standpoint, commentating on different games, it's really bizarre because it's just a different bag entirely, and sometimes there are certain things that you'll do when commentating one sport that you won't do when commentating another. The way you build up to the big moments is different. How you deliver those big moments is different as well, and it's weird because you commentate on the different things and you realize, oh, I really like this aspect of commentating on League of Legends. I like this aspect of commentating on CSGO, and for me, I've kind of found that I've essentially just tried to mash it all together. Whether that works or not, I don't know, but I really enjoy doing it.
So what elements do you take from League of Legends? What do you take from sim racing? What do you take from Rocket League to make it your commentary, Yousuf Bin-Suhayl commentary?
So when I do League of Legends, there's a lot of build up towards a fight that I like to do, or it's what I learned to do when commentating League, because it's telegraphed to an extent, a little bit like in racing. When an overtake is going to happen, you can sense that a car is setting up for that overtake, and you've got the same thing in League. And what most commentators tend to do in League, myself included, is you use that period of time, and you have to guess how long that period of time is before a fight ensues, to set up your whole narrative, to essentially lay down the groundwork of why the viewers need to be excited for this battle. Is there a rivalry going on? What's been happening in this game so far? And that's what I like to pull in for sim racing when I know that an overtake is going to happen. And CSGO, I happen to do a few casts, and one thing I learned from a certain machine once, I forget his surname, but it's Alex Machine something or other. he's really good when it comes to picking up the volume level. And there was one recent fight which, if anyone watches CSGO would know, it was heroic against someone or other in the finals. And Machine's really good when it comes to bringing up the audio level. He goes like really quiet, and it's almost like you're watching a movie and you know something's about to happen, and it gets you really invested. And it's something that I like to try to emulate to an extent, using that volume and, you know, bringing it nice and low, and then you can really set yourself up and you give yourself a nice range to prepare for whatever might be coming in a race or in a fight.
So who would you say are your biggest influences in terms of your commentary? Is there anyone in particular you would sort of say your style derives from?
Not really. I think there have been commentators who every now and then I listen to, and as I've gone further and further in commentary, I've been able to listen to more and more commentators and think, oh, this commentator does this bit really well. Why is that? Okay, can I find a similar way or maybe the same way to improve my own commentary? But I don't think there has been a particular commentator that I've kind of thought I want to be like that commentator. It's always been, no, I want to be my own style of commentator. Whether that's taking little bits from different commentators or not is, I don't know, I feel kind of irrelevant to that aspect.
Is there any commentator in particular that inspired you to take the route into commentary? Not necessarily influence, but say you wanted to give it a go. This was the person that gave you the idea. I want to try that.
I'm trying to think. If there is one commentator that could fill that, I don't know if they do, it would be James Allen. Back from when he used to do the ITV commentary of F1 back in 2007, 2006. And even to this day, he's still my favourite F1 commentator that I've listened to.
Yeah, because we've heard a lot of Murray Walker, James Allen being one. Of course, he's with Motorsport.tv now, of course. So we've got James Allen in the mix. We've got Machine when it comes to League of Legends. It's quite a varied range of influences from commentators, kind of ideas, picking here and there. What does this person do well? Is that sort of what makes it a well-rounded commentator in your perspective?
I think so, to an aspect, and I think for every commentator, you know, you've got to be yourself to some extent, because I still remember listening, actually not that long ago, I think it was a certain Clayton Captain Flower Reigns, who is what could be widely considered as the best commentator in League of Legends, period. And one of the things he said was, why try to emulate someone? If you try to be him, you're never going to be better than him, because you can't be a better him than he is. So it's kind of one thing that I do, you know, try to stick true to. Be yourself, you know, your own style, and if you can take little things from other commentators that you think is good, then perfect.
So let's talk about your experience racing and sim racing.
Yeah.
I mean, you dropped a couple of hints there that you're expecting a special delivery when you return from commentary here in Denmark. What's your sort of experience in terms of racing?
So it all started, as I mentioned before, when my dad had the Microsoft Sidewinder wheel. And for any old school gamers out there, you might recognize a game called Grand Prix 2 done by Microprose, and that, I mean, to this day, that is probably my favorite game of all time. It's so much fun. It had Michael Schumacher back in the Benetton, Damon Hill and Coulthard in the Williams, and I used to race on that. And I remember when I switched over from that to new games, I was like, this Monza track is all wrong. The chicane is supposed to be left, right at the start, and another left, right. So it's what I learned how to race on, essentially, with, you know, it's where I learned my racecraft and then following that karting. But there was a big gap after essentially Grand Prix 2 IRL karting before I then started doing any other sim racing. And it used to be a game called Toka Race Driver 3, but that was one of the most arcade games I've come across. And race on keyboard, so I've always used AZ and then the comma and full stop when everyone else was using up, down, left, right, and because that's what it used to be in Grand Prix 2, and you couldn't change that, so you had to learn how to use that. So yeah, that was good fun. And then at university I got I got a really bad, I think it was a Thrustmaster T60 wheel. It was one of those that you put on your lap and you drive around with. So I ended up using that for F1 2014. Then I got a G29 wheel, bought the F1 2015 game for PlayStation, which my friend had a PlayStation, I didn't. So when I was sharing accommodation with him, I was just living in his room. I just set up a table in his room with the wheel on it, and I was just using that all the time. And I've had that G29 wheel since, and now I've got a very nice Fanatic wheel that is in the post currently, and I've just been told yesterday will be delivered shortly.
Very nice, very nice. That'll be a nice treat when you get back home once you're finished here at GTR24H for the EEWC finale. Let's talk more about then, because we've already mentioned a lot about Formula One, which is clearly a big, huge motorsport series in your life. Are there any other motorsport series you follow?
Yes, and actually recently I've not been watching much F1. I kind of stopped watching back in 2017, 2018, because I was watching the races and I just thought, it's getting a bit boring. So care on the line on that one. But so I've always liked Verstappen. He's kind of kept me watching the race, and now George Russell as well. But MotoGP has always been one for me. Big Marc Marquez fan, so absolutely love watching that. And then every now and then dabble in watching a bit of British touring cars.
So MotoGP is something we haven't mentioned yet.
Right.
I mean, 2 wheels, and there's not a lot of there's a lot of protective clothing, but there's not a lot separating you from the tarmac. I mean, they're crazy, aren't they?
Yeah, they're absolutely. And along with the grass cart and stuff my dad got for me, he got for my brother at one point a dirt bike, and I obviously used that dirt bike probably more than my brother did. So we'd have this long overcoat and karting helmet, because we had karting helmets instead of bike helmets, gloves and all of that, and we'd go around, and so we have like this little pavement in the back garden, and because it's a dirt bike, it's not designed for that, but I would anyway still try to get the biggest lean angles possible on a bike, such to the extent that there's one foot stand and it's got metal underneath, and I'd always go to my brother afterwards and I'd be like, look, you can see we've ground down the foot pedal from the lean angle on the tarmac, and it's just been grinding away lap after lap. I got I'd say probably my biggest injury on a bike, which is I was on the bike, and I never learned any technique on a bike. No one taught me how to ride a motorbike, so it was just you go out and you kind of learn it for yourself. So one thing that as a result you don't learn how to fall off a motorbike properly. So I remember trying to tip it in for a corner too fast, bike washes out, and instead of letting go, I tried to hold on, and my hand got caught underneath the handlebar, and I remember coming out thinking, my hand hurts a bit. I take off the glove, and one of my fingernails has just peeled off entirely.
Ouch.
And I just remember looking at it and just being, because the adrenaline was pumping a bit, so I didn't feel it, but at the same time just being like, ow, that hurt.
That can't be good, yeah.
But it was good show and tell for a good few months after that point, just going into places with a hand out, fingernail missing, and the people just be like, oh, what's that?
So MotoGP then, let's talk a little bit about that. When did you first started watching that?
Oh, when did I first start watching? It would have been, the first season that I remember was when Casey Stoner was in the LCR Honda, and I think I remember him having a pretty big... No, the first season I watched... So it might have been Casey Stoner in the Honda, but it was the year that Nicky Hayden won the championship. And I remember watching that season, being a Rossi fan, being in absolute arms about Hayden winning the championship. And yeah, there was a whole bunch about that, like Elias beating Rossi to the line in God knows some race, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then Stoner went to Ducati after that, and you had the whole Stoner versus Rossi era, and it was just so much fun to watch.
So we've mentioned Michael Schumacher and we've mentioned Valentino Rossi, 2 legends, one on 4 wheels, one on 2 wheels. How much of an influence and how much of an inspiration were they both to you when you were growing up?
I think Schumacher probably was a lot more than Rossi, just because while I enjoyed racing, or while I enjoyed watching motorbikes, I always knew that if I ever got into racing, it would always be on four wheels. I never dreamed of becoming a MotoGP racer. It was always, I wanted to be in Formula One. So I think Schumacher had more in that element. And then when Hamilton joined, I've just been following Hamilton ever since Verstappen then joined into Formula One. So no, watching Schumacher, seeing the little tricks that he'd do. Monaco 06 being, was Monaco 06? Monaco 05? Monaco 06 being one of them, watching that and my dad saying, "Oh, Schumacher, you cheeky little git." And both my dad and myself are like, "Yeah, but that's really clever though." And then he gets quiet. I was like,
yeah, sent to the back of the grid, I believe it was, yes. So
I think he regretted that one.
Well, it was certainly a controversial moment. That's an understatement. So let's talk about, obviously, you have a lot of experience in quite a lot of commentary.
Yes.
So let's talk about motorsport. Have you had the luxury of going to a real motorsport track to shout in a box?
So I have once, and only once, and it's when I went to Ryehouse, a circuit our Mr. Alex Goldschmidt is more than familiar with, and they had, so it was TKM's racing, which is, for those who don't know TKM's, it's essentially two-stroke go-karts, and the other class, it was junior hire kart, so junior Honda cadets effectively, and I commentated on that. It was decent fun, but not as much fun as a lot of the online commentary I've done with you here, Kieran, and with many other events as well. So mainly just because when I did that commentary, it's by yourself, it's a solo commentary, so it's never quite as fun as when you're able to talk to a co-commentator and just bounce between them a little.
Is that connection between a co-com, is there a preference for you to do solo or with co-coms?
Oh, always with co-coms. Yeah, 100%. It's not even close for me.
What's the stark difference then between the two? You've said obviously bouncing off of someone just to get that connection, but what's the challenges between solo and co-com?
So the issue with solo commentary is, especially if it's a very entertaining race, is your voice dies very, very quickly, and it's hard to keep going for a long period of time. And even if you get a 5-minute break after that, you've then got to jump back on in again for the next race or for a following battle. It also becomes a little bit monologue-y, and it's hard not to because you're the only one there, so you can't really get a dialogue when there's only one person. So as a result, it can, at least for me when I'm commentating, I start to hate the sound of my own voice. I'm just thinking, just shut up already, Yousuf. Everyone's been hearing you for about 2 hours now. So it's a lot more fun when you've got someone else to bounce off, and someone else who sometimes agrees with you in your opinion, sometimes disagrees with you, and you get to have that discussion, you get to have that another aspect, and you get to have some fun as well. It's hard to make jokes and have fun when you're the only one, because you make a joke and, well, you're the only one there to really laugh at it.
So obviously then your sim racing experience has taken you around the globe in about 3 or 4 clicks at a time. So are any of those circuits you've been to virtually you'd love to go to in person?
I think I'd like to go to Spa at some point. I've been to 3 tracks in my life, or 4. So I've been to Silverstone once to watch the Renault Formula Series. So they had Renault Megane, Formula Renault. Oliver Rowland was racing at the time. Been to Snetterton to watch bike racing, and Snetterton is my local track, so I've been there a few other times, and I'll be honest, watching bike racing is not fun. It was super bikes, and I remember standing on the outside of Coram, which is the really fast right-hander at the end of the circuit, and literally you're just sat there or stood there, and all you see is just pium 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 on these guys going about 160 on bikes, and just thinking, well, I should have watched this on TV. Apparently I've been to Donington Park as well when I was young, been to Brands Hatch once. I think we stood on the exit of Paddock Hill Bend, so that was good fun. But yeah, not been to any other tracks, but Spa would definitely be one on the list.
And in your sim racing experience then, what's a circuit that when you load it up for a commentary you think, yes, this is going to be great because it's this circuit?
So I mean, like you, Kieran, commentate a lot on F1. Spa is always one of those because you have the whole DRS battles going on to the final lap of the race, and you always know at Spa that the last lap can always determine a race. So for me, Spa is one of the big ones in that regards. I think it is usually Spa. Austria is another one, just because I've seen some great races at Austria online. Maybe Bahrain as well. Not a lot of fun for me to race at personally, but to commentate on races, to watch races, it's pretty awesome.
Pretty awesome indeed, yes. Obviously we've talked about MotoGP, we've talked about Formula 1, I mean 2 wheels and 4. Pretty varied experience. I mean that sort of relates into your virtual commentary as well, be it Motorsport, be it League of Legends, be it, as you say, Rocket League as well. So combining all of that, it's a very varied career, and you're younger than me, you're at the very start of your career. So I would say let's go back 15, 20 years, but you might be too young then. Let's go back 10 years. Yeah, let's go back 10 years. What piece of advice are you giving your younger self?
10 years ago. How old was I 10 years ago? 12. I
don't know, that's only something you have to answer.
I was not a nice person when I was 12. I was so full of myself. I don't know why these 12-year-olds think that they're the shits and stuff. So apologies, but yeah.
We'll get soap on him, don't worry.
My one advice that I would give when you get to uni, make sure to start commentating. Join the gaming society. It's one of the biggest things that I regret. And being at uni, going into my 3rd year and essentially stopping the radio stuff to focus on my degree. Now with hindsight's a wonderful thing, and now I'd say sod the degree, focus on that. But in another world, it probably could end very badly. So I think it's a 50-50 piece of advice that you can only give with hindsight. But overall, I'd say join the gaming society, start commentating a bit earlier.
And you've had a lot of experience with virtual commentary. What was the main thing you noticed, especially when the UK went into lockdown in March 2020? Did you feel, or what was your reaction into how that happened, and how did you deal with this uncertain time?
So for me, because I started all with virtual commentary when I started sim racing, when I started doing league, it was all online. I'd never had the pleasure or the luxury of being able to be here in a studio, wherever that may be, being able to see my co-commentator and work with them in that regard. So it was always online. So when everything hit, it made no changes to me. And one of the things that I did enjoy, and I probably shouldn't have, was watching a lot of the actual commentators who did live events switching back to online and struggling, because it just told me, it's a lot harder to do it online, and all of the struggles that I had, it made it seem that if I do get that opportunity, I can match them essentially. So it was a 50-50, and also in another aspect, because of how COVID affected everything, it was, drat, I can't go and see it, everyone. It's not a pleasant time by any stretch of the imagination with everything that was going on. But one of the best things that did happen, and it's one thing that I think a lot of people saw coming when it did, was esports picking up. And it was something that I was able to get, some satisfaction in seeing, silver lining in what was a rather dark cloud at the time.
So let's finish this off with what is quickly becoming everyone's favourite part of the podcast talk show.
I should have listened into the previous one. I would have got a bit of an insight.
Well, Kieran's cliche question is here, everyone's favourite. So money, no object. What would be your dream car?
The thing is, I remember when I was young, and my dad used to have this old Peugeot 106, and it used to be my favourite car in the world. And I always told myself, when I get older, I'll get a Peugeot 106. Now I don't have it because, God no, I don't want a Peugeot 106. But there is something really cool about having a small car, and I currently have a Kia Picanto, because I was saying to Alex Goldschmidt on the way down to Stansted, I could go in my Kia Picanto, I can drop it down in first gear, I can absolutely floor it through a village, like full revs, everything, for about 5-6 seconds, people looking like, who is this nutcase blasting it through the village? And all they'll see is a Kia Picanto doing about 25 through the village. So you get to have a lot of good fun with some old bad cars, let's say. But if I was to get, am I allowed to get a race car?
Money, no object.
Money, no object. Okay, well, it's definitely going to be a race car.
Okay.
What race car would I want to get? What series would be fun? because I know if I was going to get a car, I've kind of stopped being as interested in cars as I was 5-6 years ago, because I've kind of shifted more over just to being interested in racing full stop. But it was when on Top Gear and they did the whole piece on Porsche 918 Spider when hybrid cars first started being a thing, and I always really liked that car, and I've never really changed. So if it was a car, it would definitely be the 918 Spider. If it was a race car though, it's a tough one. I think I wouldn't go for a GT car. I think I'd probably go for BTCC or something like that, one of the support series. So yeah, I'd probably get myself a nice seat in British touring cars.
Well, there you go. That's Yousuf Bin-Suhayl. Sign him up, BTCC. That's for sure. That's the message we can get from this podcast, isn't it?
Yeah. If any sponsors out there want to find me for a season of BTCC,
he's right here. Yousuf, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us onto the show, everyone. Yousuf Bin-Suhayl. Well, that's going to round up the GTR24H podcast talk show.